everybody. Welcome back to Crafting and Crime Daily. I am your host, Rebecca, and in today's episode, we're going to cover day 1 after the openings and day 2 of the Jennifer Crumley trial. Jennifer is on trial for 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. And what that means is that it's not murder, it's manslaughter, which means the prosecution has to prove to the jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the actions of Jennifer's 15-year-old son, Ethan Crumley, on November 30th of 2021 were reasonably foreseeable. So keep that in mind. Are they proving by what they're putting on the stand, these witnesses, that she could have foreseen what her son was going to do that day? And that's open fire and shoot and kill 4 teenagers at the Oxford High School and injure 7 others. There. Now, before we get into it, I would like for you to please subscribe. And don't forget, when you subscribe, I always forget this, hit the notification bell. You want to make sure you hit all so you do not miss a single episode. And the thumbs up button. Yeah, hit that as well. So we're picking up after the opening statements. The first person on the stand is Special Agent from the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm Federal Division. And he explained to the jury that the ATF officers go in and they will investigate any kind of crimes that involve firearms. And he was assigned to the Oxford school shooting. He was the lead ATF investigator, and he was Johnny on the spot. He was there day 1. So here was his involvement. Following the school shooting, which happened over a few minutes, like very few minutes, it was over and done with very quickly. Ethan, when he was done, and they keep calling him the shooter, Ethan, when he was done shooting, he took the gun and he set it on top of a trash can, and then he went down to his knees and then down flat on the ground so he could be taken into custody. So this guy took possession of the weapon, took note of the serial number, and they looked up the serial number and it was registered to a particular person. So they contacted that particular person and he said, no, I no longer own that gun. I sold it back to the gun store where I bought it. So they go to this gun store and they confirm that, yes, this guy sold it back to them, and then they sold it to James Crumley. And here's the paperwork. So they showed the paperwork. And amongst this paperwork is a document that you have to sign, and James Crumley signed this document, indicating that in order to complete this purchase, you have to purchase a lock for the gun or some kind of way to keep this gun safe and out of the reach of children. And so he purchased a cable lock. It's a trigger lock. And once this cable lock is engaged, you cannot pull the trigger. And he purchased a case. He also, told the guy, I've got a gun safe at home. So with the purchase of this gun came a pamphlet, the Youth Handgun Safety Act notice. And this special agent read some of this notice to the jury. So this notice is number 1. It says the misuse of handguns is a leading contributor to juvenile violence and fatalities. Now, this agent told the jury that the number 1 cause of death in children is by handguns. I did not know that. Number 2, safely storing and securing firearms away from children will help prevent the unlawful possession of handguns by juveniles, stop accidents, and save lives. Yeah. Federal law prohibits, except in certain limited circumstances, anyone under 18 years of age from knowingly possessing a handgun or any person from selling, delivering, or otherwise transferring a handgun to a person under 18. Ethan was 15. A knowing violation of the prohibition against selling, delivering, or otherwise transferring a handgun to a person under the age of 18 is, under certain circumstances, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Yeah. So I wanted to show you a picture of this handgun. Now, this officer talked about 3 different handguns that were in the home, the Crumley home. But the handgun that killed these 4 people, these 4 teenagers, was a Sig Sauer special, or 22, Sig Sauer SP 22, 9mm handgun. And it was purchased by James Crumley because his son could not purchase it. But he and his wife gave it to his son as an early Christmas present. And that was proven through various text messages and Instagram posts, that they had purchased a Christmas present for their son. It was purchased on November 26th. Now, I think it may have been purchased before that. It was picked up on the 26th. That's when the purchase was completed, and James Crumley picked up the weapon. The shooting happened 4 days later, on the 30th. Now, I think that Thursday prior to the shooting was Thanksgiving. Yeah. So this officer, through this officer's testimony, they showed several videos of Ethan going to the gun range between September 25th of 2021 and the day of the shooting. He had gone to the gun range several times with his parents, sometimes with dad, at least one time with mom. And so we got to see that footage of Ethan handling this weapon, and he handled it like he knew what he was doing. He was actually showing mom how to use the weapon. Now, this officer said that he had, as part of his investigation, he had watched the surveillance footage of the actual shooting. And he said that there were 32 rounds fired. Then he explained that the magazine that goes into this gun holds 15 rounds. So what you do is you put the magazine in, and then you put a round in the gun. I'm not a gun owner, so anyway, a round goes into, so it's ready to fire. Then you take the magazine out, and then you can put one more bullet in it. So 16 at a time, and they found 32 shell casings. So he was out of ammunition, apparently. He had 2 magazines with him during this shooting. So he said, but when he watched this video, there was a few things that stood out to him. And he felt like that the things that he was observing showed that Ethan was proficient at using this gun. The first thing was, during part of the shooting, he's just using one arm. But when Tate, who's one of the victims, comes into the picture, or he actually used 2 hands, the sights, and he would put himself into a shooter stance. So he explained to the jury he actually had the gun, and he showed this to the jury. Here's a picture of this gun, and he showed this to the jury. There's 2 little dots on the front. There's, the top part of the gun. There's 2 little dots on the front, and one down towards where the bullet comes out. And if those 3 dots line up, then you can shoot, I guess. Anyway, so he took 2 hands. He had his shoulders forward. He was his legs apart, and so this stood out to him. Like, this kid knows what he's doing. Then he watched him switch magazines. take the empty one out, put the other one in. And he said he performed what he called a tactical combat reload, which is something you have to be taught how to do. I have no idea, but he was impressed that this kid knew how to do this. Then before he turned himself in, he took the magazine out, which he said makes the firearm safe. So he took the magazine out of the gun before he set the gun on the trash can. So he knew that, which is wild. You just shot all these people, but you want to take the magazine out. I don't know. Before he was taken into custody, takes the magazine out, sets the gun on the trash can. So they did show these visits to the gun range and him and his mom shooting at targets. And to my knowledge, these people were not hunters. This was not like, I don't know what the purpose of this gun was except to go to the range and shoot targets and kill people, apparently. So this ATF agent goes on to talk about some Facebook messages and an Instagram story where Ethan put up a video of him shooting at the range on his Instagram. And he did note that both Jennifer and James are following Ethan's Instagram account. So he sent 2 videos to his friend through Facebook Messenger. He had this friend that he would communicate with very, very often. A lot of text messages, a lot of Facebook messages to this friend, back and forth, and that's going to really come into play during this case. So the first video that he sent to his friend, he is sitting. The officer had been in the Crumley home, so he was familiar with the layout of the home and what was where. And he said he could tell by this video that he was sitting on the couch. And he was showing his friend the Caltech weapon, which is another of the weapons that the Crumleys owned. And this was actually before they purchased the 6 Sauer for their son. So he had sent a video to his friend showing this Caltech weapon, which I understand is a very similar weapon to the 6 Sauer 22. So, and then he sent him a second video where the gun was on the kitchen table, and he picks up the gun and loads the magazine and chambers around, which is what I explained before inartfully, where you put the 15 rounds in, you chamber around. So, and this was on a video that he sent to his son. So what they did was they obtained through a search warrant and a subpoena to Google location data for James and Jennifer. And at the time these videos were taken, they were both home with him. Now, on cross-examination, he had to admit he doesn't know if they were aware that he was doing these videos. They could have been in a different room, but he explained, listen, this is a 900 square foot house. It isn't that big. And it's supposed to be locked. These guns, when you purchase them, are supposed to be locked. Even your Caltech. And Caltech and a Derringer were the other 2 guns. And then they showed a text message that he had sent to his friend that accompanied the video saying, "My dad left it out." So I thought, why not? LOL. So there were several text messages between James and Jennifer talking about the purchase of this weapon for their son. On one occasion, June 15th of 2021, she asked James, her husband, if he had purchased the gun for him yet. And he says, or she said, "You get gun?" Then the next was, he said yes and no. And she said, huh? And then he said, "We paid for the gun and bought it, but can't pick it up till everything clears with Washington. Could be today, tomorrow, or the next day. They don't know. That was back in June. Now, they don't pick up this gun until November, after Thanksgiving. Then she says, "Gotcha. Bring me those fruit punch things when you come to bring hay." So she's out with her horses. Now, this is going to come to play a lot. James and Jennifer love their horses. They had 2 male horses that they kept on a farm, and they were constantly out with these horses. And if you were reading the text messages in their totality, it appears they were more concerned about horses' health than their son's mental health. That's just my opinion. All right. So then they showed him on the range. This was posted on Jennifer's Instagram account. And she says, Ethan and James both got handguns this week, testing them out at the range. And it's an outdoor range. So then they showed a Instagram post another Instagram post that Ethan put up saying, "Just got my new beauty today, Sig Sauer 9mm. Ask any questions, I will answer." And a picture of the gun inside the case with the magazine sitting next to it. And there's no cable lock on that gun. Then another Instagram post by Ethan's that went along with that same story, same caption, where he's holding the gun. That's the one um, where you see the dining room table in the background. Then they went through Jennifer's phone and they found a photo that she had taken of the new weapon that shows the cable lock and the Use Safety Act pamphlet inside this case. So they got the pamphlet. Then there's a Instagram post that Jennifer Crumley posted where she shows their target from the gun range. Another one where she says, "Mom and Sunday." This was how they spent their Mom and Sunday, going to the gun range, testing out his new Christmas present. My first time shooting a 9mm, I hit the bullseye. And then accompanying that is, again, a picture of the gun, the 2 magazines, and the pamphlet. Yes. Then the jury, for the first time, gets to see the math sheet. Now, it came in through this witness because they wanted him to point out the similarities of the gun that was drawn on this math sheet to the Sig Sauer 9mm. So he pointed out why it looks so similar in this drawing. Now, this is a math worksheet that he had been given in class the day of the shooting, the morning of the shooting, and he draws this gun. You can see that he's drawn him using the gun, or somebody lying there with bullet holes and blood, and he says, "Blood everywhere." Then it says, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me. My life is useless. The world is dead." Yeah. So this was confiscated by the teacher at 8:59 a.m., the morning of the shooting. Yeah. It This thing is very haunting. This piece of paper. Wow. So in all of these images that I've just shown you, you do not see a lock on this gun. And clearly Ethan had access to it. He's taken pictures of it, sending it to his friend. So one of the trips to the gun range, you can see Jennifer and Ethan purchased 2 boxes of ammunition for the weapon. And they could not find, through their investigation, any other ammunition purchased anywhere for this weapon. So that was the only purchase of ammunition that they could find was at the gun range that day. So on cross-examination, he admitted to the defense attorney that it is not against the law for a minor to shoot a gun. Like they're allowed to have a gun at the gun range and shoot it or handle a gun. He had to admit that there's no law governing how to secure and store a gun in your home. Maybe there should be. And then he had to admit that the other two guns owned by the Crumley family, were found in the gun safe when they searched the home after the shooting. And interestingly enough, they were able to open that gun safe by trying, it was a combination. 000 was the combination. Yeah. So they never, which is the combination it comes with. It comes with 000, and then you have to set a different combination. So they never changed it from 000. So how easy would it have been for Ethan to go into that safe if they had put it in there, to go in there and get it? Now, it's at this point that I wrote in my notes that this defense attorney is very relatable. Now, that was at the point that we had the ATF guy on the stand. I think she was doing a good job with her cross-examination, but by the end of day 2, I was over it. Like, she kept saying, "You're going too fast. Please slow down." And then she would say, "What they're doing is not fair." And if she said, "I'm sorry," 1,000 times, I would not be exaggerating. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Sorry, Your Honor. Sorry." Um, where most people would say, "Excuse me, Your Honor, I object," or whatever, something like that. She'd say, "Sorry, Your Honor, but they're they're telling the witnesses their answer, and could you tell them to stop doing that?" And the judge looks at her and goes, so your objection is leading?" And she's like, yeah." Now, I don't know if this is an act, but it's going to wear very thin on the jury. It really is. So what the prosecution was doing, that she was moaning and groaning about, is they had taken all of the text messages and the Facebook messages, and there were thousands when you talk about between Jennifer and James, and between Jennifer and her son, and between James, or her son and his friend. And the prosecution had cherry picked what they wanted to show the jury. So they would show, Jennifer's text and the response. And in between there would be 3 dots. The judge told the defense attorney, "You can see that there's 3 dots there, which means there's something in between there." There were text messages in between. And they said, she told the jury, "Listen, no one's trying to hide anything from you. We're going to put the entire messages into evidence, but the prosecution is allowed to try the case the way they want to try the case, and they can put in just parts of those messages." Now, what they should have done is given the defense a copy of what they were going to put in or show the jury. They put the whole thing into evidence, but they should have let her have a courtesy copy of what they were going to show to the jury. Because now she's sitting here going, "Where are they? They're going too fast. Hold on. I'm trying to find." And they would tell her, "We're on page, such and such." Because they bait stamp everything, which is where you number every page. Um, Crazy. That could have been a drinking game. Every time she says sorry, take a drink. You'd have been flat on your butt. Yeah. All right. So the next witness was from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. He is a cell phone forensic expert, a computer expert. So he was talking about, again, the Facebook messages, all that stuff, the thousands of pages of stuff. But he talked about how they recovered 7 different phones in this case. And to the defense attorney's credit, on cross-examination, she straightened out why they had all these phones. They both had, I don't know, T-Mobile phones, James and Jennifer. The afternoon of the shooting, those were confiscated by law enforcement. They turned them over so that this guy could see what was on them. Not before Jennifer erased all of her Facebook messages. More on that to come. Well, I'll just tell you now that I learned something new. If you erase a Facebook message to someone, it will still be there. It's erased on your end. But unless the person you sent that to erases it, it's still going to be there. Facebook keeps it in a cloud somewhere. And they did subpoena Facebook to get all the messages. So if, for example, if Jennifer texts James and then she deletes all those Facebook messages to James, if James hasn't deleted them, they're still there. Now, if they both delete their messages, then they're gone forever. Just so you know. Okay. So back to the phones. 2 T-Mobile phones, one one for each parent. Those were given to the police. So afterwards, that night they go get burner phones because they got to call lawyers. They're trying to figure out what to do. They actually talked about later on that they stayed in a hotel. They never went back to their home. Have never spent another night in that home. Because they were scared for their life. They were getting like nasty emails, and yeah, it was terrible. People were just blowing up their social media, saying how horrible they were, and so they were very, very scared. So they went to a hotel and they stayed in different places. So that's 4 phones. Then when the first opportunity they go back to T-Mobile and they get 2 more phones with the same phone number as the original phones. And the reason they didn't like the burner phones is because they wanted to access things, and it required a 2-person or 2-step authentication, and you couldn't do that on the burner phones, so they had to go back to T-Mobile and get, yeah, anyway, but there's that. So, and then Ethan's phone. So 7 cell phones this guy had to analyze. And then he had to look at Facebook messages, Instagram accounts. There was a lot of work that this guy did. So he said Jennifer had he had to look at the original phone seized. He had to look at the track phone. He had to look at the second phone, and then he had to look at her Facebook messages and Instagram. With Ethan, they had to look at his phone, his T-Mobile phone, his Facebook, and his Instagram, and then he had to look at both everybody's Gmail, Yahoo. I mean, he did a deep dive everywhere. So the day of the shooting, this guy gets called out to the property. Like he responds to the shooting because he said he was in his office and someone came in and said there's an active shooter at Oxford High School, all hands on deck. So he gets his stuff and he goes out to Oxford High School. And they ask, his friend was out there, and his friend was trying to get the DVR footage uh, of the actual shooting. They were still trying to figure out, is there one shooter, is there more than one shooter? Because by the time he gets there, Ethan's in custody, but they didn't know if there was anybody else there. So they needed to see this footage. So he helped him get the footage off the DVR. He said that footage is burned in his brain, and he was asked to describe the footage that he saw, and he went through every single step of what occurred that day verbatim. He said it's burned in my brain, and he was very tearful when he was doing that. Oh, you could tell it really impacted him what he saw. He talked about a text on March 17th of 2021, so several months before the shooting where it was St. Patrick's Day, and Jennifer had indicated she was in a message between her and her husband that she was going to go out, she was going to get drunk and go ride her horse. This was the same day that her son texts her that the house is haunted. The text messages read, "Okay, the house is now haunted. Some weird shit just happens and now I'm scared. I got some videos and a picture of the demon. It is throwing bowls. I am not joking. It fucked up the kitchen." Then he says, "I'm just going to be outside for a while. Can you at least text back?" Her text back to him was, "Where's your father? Where's your..." Yeah, I'm not even gonna comment on that. There was many more texts be- between Jennifer and James and Jennifer and her friend that were introduced to the jury, showing how concerned she is over the health of these horses, and that was her focus, was these horses. So then the prosecution asked this guy, did you put together a digital footprint of the day of the shooting? And he said yes. So the jury is sent to lunch. Everybody goes to lunch. When they come back from lunch, we get the digital footprint. So, and I'm going to walk you guys through this. 7:46 a.m. James drops his son off at school. Then at 9:04, Jennifer Crumley arrives at work. At 9:24, on her phone was a missed call from Oxford High School. She calls them back at 9:27, and they have a 5-minute conversation. At 9:31, she receives that math worksheet. The school is sending this to her. The school counselor sends her this math worksheet. At 9:33, she texts James, "Call now, emergency." He doesn't respond. So at 9:35, 2 minutes later, she said, "Emergency," all caps. 9:38, she sends a worksheet to James, and he responds at 9:44, "My God, WTF." At 9:50, at 10:04, he texts back, "Heading to school." And then at 10:05, she sends the math page to her boss. Then at 10:06, you see her leaving work. At 10:07, she's having a 40-second phone conversation with the counselor. At 10:12, there's a text, "Headed to school." At 10:29, James is calling her, and they have a 7-minute conversation. So they arrive at the school at 10:37. They took separate cars. At 10:40, you see them walking into the counselor's office. At 10:52, you see the shooter walk out of the counselor's office. At 10:53, you see James and Jennifer leaving the counselor's office. So this witness said that the total amount of time they spent in the counselor's office for the meeting regarding the math sheet, 12 minutes, roughly 12 minutes. Then at 10:58, Jennifer is texting her friend about the horse. And then James goes back to doing his DoorDash thing. At 11:24, you see Jennifer arriving back at work. At 11:26, she's still texting back and forth with her friend. At 12:42, she texts her son, "Are you okay?" His reply is, "Yeah, I just got back from lunch." And she says, "You can talk to us and we won't judge." And he says, he responds back at 12:42 and 34 seconds. I know. Thank you. I'm sorry for that. I love you. So then we know that at 12:51 or 12:42 is the time, as he's texting this to his mother, that he's entering the bathroom and changes his clothes. He comes out at 12:51 and the shooting starts. At 1:09, James receives an active shooter alert. The school sent out to every parent the shooter alert. He receives it on his phone via email. And at that point in time, the Google has him in the parking lot of the Meijer. Is Meijer a department store or grocery store? It's like the, I don't know. It's like that, a department grocery store type thing, Meijer. And at 1:15 p.m., James calls Jennifer. She is, at that point in time, he is still in the Meijer parking lot. At 1:18 p.m., you can see Jennifer Crumley leaving work. She's on her phone with James for the next 10 minutes. She sends her, and while she's on the phone with James, she's sending texts to her boss and to her son. At 1:20 p.m., James's location changes to their home. So he goes from Meijer, he drives about a mile to their home, and he's still on the phone with Jennifer. And then you see the 3 texts that Jennifer sends to her son. And these texts are at 1:18. She says, I love you too. So that was her first time responding to his earlier comment that he loved her before the shooting started, minutes before the shooting started. And then when he doesn't respond, she says, you okay? And then again at 1:22, she types, Ethan, don't do it. Then at 1:23, she texts her boss. And she tells the boss, the gun is gone and so are the bullets. I'm praying everything is okay. And that's what he says. And then she says, oh my God, Andy, he's going to kill himself. He must be the shooter. Now, we also know that during this time frame, after James goes to the house, he calls 911. And I'm going to wrap this up by letting you hear his call to 911. I'm trying. Exhibit 143. Interesting. It was hard to hear at the beginning, but it gets clearer as the call goes on. But so he is at that Meijer doing his DoorDash thing. He rushes home, realizes the gun is gone, the bullets are gone, and he's calling 911, and he wants someone to come to their house. And she tells him, the dispatcher tells him, no, they're all at the shooting, but they do eventually come there, and the drama begins. Yes. So that's where I'm going to leave off today. I will pick this up probably on Wednesday. I'll have episode number 3 of this trial. So I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Love you all.